What's up, everybody? This is Karak with ACG. We are doing Game of the Year. We're going to cover a couple different titles. We're going to have some honorable mentions. None of these are in any particular order, so don't fret. Also, remember, I might not have played the games you did, so this is my list. Let's get to it. As you guys know, even though 2019 was considered a drab year by a lot of people, I actually found it to be filled with some profound experiences that formed one of the more memorable years in gaming for me. That's why when it came to the Game of the Year awards, I looked back and I thought to myself, I can make a big list of a bunch of titles to pad the video to these extraordinary lengths for no reason, especially if you've seen the videos or the podcast before, or I could go super short and just be like, Game of the Year for sure goes to Anthem and peace out and drop the mic. I'm not going to do either one of those. What I did do is I went back and I played all of the very high rated games that I played prior. I don't normally do list videos because of this, and because many times I feel it's nothing more than a regurgitation of recency bias. So when I went back, I booted them up and I played every single high rated game again, not all the way through, but sort of wanted to get those experiences to verify my thoughts as we move forward. And I came up with 3 games, a couple of which I think are actually going to surprise people. I played these. They represent my experiences in 2019. None are perfect. Most titles this year had some very noticeable weaknesses. However, they still came together to offer excellent experiences. Without further ado, 3 games of the year for me. Oh, as always, if you like the video, maybe subscribe, or check out the Patreon, or check out the iTunes, or check out the Spotify. You get it. It's all in the description. Let's begin. Plague Tale. I don't think anybody's really surprised about this one. I love the title. Who thought a game about 2 siblings working their way together through a unique environment, backed up by all these fascinating narratives and unique puzzles, all backdropped by a somewhat mystical atmosphere, was going to be on the list? Probably anybody who played Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons. To say this game was a surprise to me is doing such a disservice to the word surprise. With you and your sibling towed along as you try to work your way to safety, the game, once again, like a title I'm going to mention in a second, merges aesthetics with distinct gameplay elements all spread across the game's time frame to create this full stamp on your mind. This is a title really that doesn't seem like it would do well. It's about 2 kids stealthing through 1300s pastoral French countries invaded by the English, who may or may not have a magical bad guy leading them. All the while, one of the kids develops the ability to control rats. It sounds all over the place. But sending those rats out after enemies and using them for everything from stealth to making items retrievable in the game world allows you to interact in a very unique way with the title. This is all, of course, backed up by stunning graphics, an incredible soundtrack, and rock-solid voice acting, in particular for a B-level title. Not the first time we've seen this, as a lot of us looked at Hellblade years prior and thought that that one nailed it. Plague Tale's story never slows down, and just when you think to yourself, you know what, I get it, suddenly you have some kind of Rat King stronghold, and you think to yourself, the game's not going to actually have me build a base and gather armies, is it? No, it's not. But the title's ability to make you wonder that just for a second, then turn that second into 10 hours of gameplay is well worth all the accolades it gets. It has a unique atmosphere, and it really does have a very personal, very engaging story throughout the entire game. Well worth getting. And another title worth getting is the number 2, again, in no order. It's Disco Elysium. I don't think this surprises anybody. Take the Shield, Mulholland Drive, and then rub a bit of His Dark Materials together, and you sort of get Disco Elysium. It also helps if you spent your teenage years in your parents' basement arguing Thaco rules and 2nd edition D&D and making charts on your Peachies. It is a rabid beast of a game. It's always tenacious in its attacks against the status quo and its narrative, always pushing buttons, no matter which set of buttons they are, even if their set of buttons make sense at that particular time. Disco Elysium rocked a double-fisted narrative middle finger flex blast on everything, from science to agriculture to religion to politics to relationships to the afterworld. And it did all that in a game where technically most of the other party members, aside from the poor bastard who was shafted to be with you, are shoved deep down into a fractured psyche that's so manifest with problems that most psychiatrists would bill you for the number of voices in your head if you sat down on the couch. All of this crazy was backed up by a wickedly cynical narrative and world history, as well as a couple personal moments if you actually paid attention and took the chance. That's one of the things I loved about Disco Elysium. There were a lot of elements to it that you could easily miss or easily not pick up depending on your choices. Choices mattered. In many ways, Disco was very, very close to a role-playing game without a GM, with each skill and attribute you had in the game having their own psyche. It was easy to spend a couple minutes just arguing with your perception skills over what you were or weren't seeing, especially if those skills were set so strong that they became overbearing to the rest. Disco has you traipsing through the strange universe of detective drama and low science sci-fi and gritty cyber future, but somehow then trapped it into early 1900s atmospheres. To say the game had a lot of balls to juggle is a wicked understatement. To say it succeeded is in the same ballpark of understatement, though. Disco did it without any of the usual trouble we see in a lot of games of its type as well. As you continue through the title, slowly unfurling the flag of surrender that your previous night was, you begin to sort of work down a rabbit hole with your partner in crime and solve mysteries that are mundane and maybe a bit magical, and probably die a couple times in ways you could not have expected. The most telling thing about Disco, though, it almost physically replicated the original tech-style adventures like Zork, but it took into account the caveats of today's gaming expectations. It merged them into what is, at its base, an isometric RPG in the strictest sense, but also a bit of visual novel aesthetic as well. Then flipped it on its side, then flipped it again, then thought, you know what, it's not done, and flipped it again. Profoundly well done. And profoundly well done brings us to number 3, Sekiro. Now, this might be a surprise for some people, but bear with me. I have been open that I'm not always on the FromSoft bandwagon, and I go into each title with a bit of trepidation over what I might actually find. Stepping into 16th century Sengoku period Japan as the Orphan Wolf turned out to be a highlight of my year for various reasons. A year that had its fair share of amazing games. But the unique way which it handled battle and a dual-tiered system here that required gamers to not just focus on the typical requirements of the prior games, but also balance that guard system on top of it worked. It combined a robust grapple and travel system as well to showcase a scale of verticality unmatched in a lot of other titles, in particular third-person action titles, other than, let's say, a Tomb Raider title where that's really its major strength. But Sekiro also had one of the pinnacle moments for an action scene presentation to me in games, even outside of 2019. It sounds so mundane until you experience it, but having a general smash into the location for battle, challenging you with verbal taunts from his horse and a recitation of his reasons for being there, it brought everything I love about action games together. In a moment, this enemy was real. There was a history there, and there he was in front of me, and frankly, kicking my ass. It didn't need a huge vista with a big camera angle, wide lens for the fakery to make you think the world was bigger than it was. It simply needed an excellent fighting system, unique world, and General Jiobu Onawa tromping in on his horse, thunder-fucking you 7 ways from Sunday as he rampaged across the killing grounds of a battlefield he had already laid waste to. That environmental storytelling, merging the past, the threat of the future with the crumbling state of the present all around you under the time-sensitive requirement of not having him run a 12-foot spear thingy through your bowels, is where the game excelled, and it did so with stunning regularity, just like the others. For me, a game of the year isn't just how I experienced it, but if it stuck with me, if I could overlook its deficiencies, of which they all have, and embrace its experience and how it resonated with me. Especially when you look at Sekiro, I did have some issues here and there with that title for sure, but it doesn't really matter when I come to the end of the year because I look back and I start thinking about it and I'm like, this game absolutely stuck with me. It was like glue, and every single time I talked about an experience, those kind of moments, like the general busting in on the horse, is something I consistently brought up. Speaking of bringing some things up, let's discuss a couple honorable mentions. First, Resident Evil 2, a stunning remake, a really enjoyable game through and through, and technically very, very proficient. Really fun, and I can't wait to see what those guys do with their next titles, and, well, both their originals and their remakes. I also want to bring up a game that I'm sure nobody's going to expect me to bring up, but I'm bringing it up on pure fun factor as an honorable mention, and that's World War Z. I absolutely bringing that up. It had some technical issues, but when you got into that game, if you like those style of games, that thing was incredible fun. There's a reason why it sold like gangbusters. That title was a huge success for them, and I would like to see, of course, them continue to shore that up technically and continue to offer more content, but I'm actually interested in where they're going. The next up, honorable mentions got to be Outer Worlds. Outer Worlds had some great characters, really engaging story, and for me, a length that I think fit perfectly. We also found out just recently we're getting DLC, which I'm super excited for because I really do like that world. It did have some issues, though, especially with up-close combat that I think we all pretty much noticed, as well as the fact that it didn't have a ton of bugs was good, but it did have a couple really, really odd ones. That's been shored up. I dig that game. And of course, there's Star Wars. Now, what's weird about Star Wars to me is I feel that if it didn't have the Star Wars name, I'm not 100% sure that game would be on anybody's lists or even be up there. I did like the game. I do think Star Wars is actually a profoundly enjoyable title in the Star Wars universe. But I also do feel that the different parts of the gameplay don't necessarily mix perfectly together. But I did want to mention it, as I know a lot of people played it. The same thing can be said for Death Stranding. It's a unique title. It offers something that I think a lot of people were not expecting. Some people love it, some people hate it. But it's a title out there that I think, of course, you're going to see in a lot of these lists. And speaking of lists, let's bring this to an end with a title that I absolutely adore. And I have to congratulate those people making it, and that's Control. Control had issues. It absolutely did. It certainly had technical issues on the consoles. It was horribly performing on the consoles for the most part. Had some issues on the tech side on the PC. Some of those have been shored up. But it also had one of the best lore systems I have played in years. Its matching in and mending in with the other games from that developer worked perfectly. Alan Wake and Quantum Break to a lesser extent. Control was hyper enjoyable for what it did, and it had some profoundly good destruction. One of the best destruction engines this year. Another game that should probably get an honorable mention, which is Gears 5, felt completely static and non-moving when I played it after Control, because everything was breakable. It was made out of graham crackers. You could just destroy everything in the game. You play something after that, and it feels so static and unmoving. And again, that narrative matching in with Quantum Break and Alan Wake. I'm a big fan of that kind of stuff, and I think it certainly does deserve to be on anybody's list if they've played it, as well as possibly an honorable mention. So that's my list. I'd like to know your list. Throw those in the comments if you get a chance. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you dislike the video, give it a thumbs down. Hey, if you get a chance, check out Patreon. It's no joke. Everything's being demonetized. YouTube is falling apart. I'm doing as much as I can to diversify, which you'll see me on Twitch and Twitter and other places trying to get out content. You'll see me on iTunes, Spotify. You can look up ACG, the best gaming podcast. All our podcasts are there. I would love for you to watch on Twitch. Remember, on Twitch, VODs are saved for 6 months, meaning you can view it just like you would view YouTube. You don't need to view it in real time. I would love for you guys to check it out. I would love for that support. It's been a rough year. This last year has been all over the place. And to be honest, looking at everything, it looks like next year is going to be even worse. So if I've saved you any cash or maybe found you a game that you really liked, I would love for you to come by Patreon. We have a great team there. We have incredible mods, administrators, private game servers, all kinds of crazy shit if you want to do it. We even have a couple little side D&D games that go. So I would love to have you step in. That's it for me. Peace out and enjoy 2020.
¿Me podrías decir, por favor, cuántos días ha trabajado?
Es que las láminas las quemé, de esas que me dieron cuando trabajé.
¿Pero cuántos días en total, más o menos?
Más o menos.
¿De 45 años has podido trabajar un año?
7 años. 7, por ahí ya más. Hasta hoy.
De 45 años, 7 años.
7.
Pero con descansos.
Yo lo primero que entraba a donde me colocaba pedía el día de descanso ya. Y me dice, hago yo, ha entrado usted y ya está pidiendo el día de descanso.
¿Sí? ¿Y cuál es el trabajo más duro que has hecho?
Ve por la paellera, venga, que a las 2 de la tarde ya están aquí. Miren, bañador, en las chanclas. Voy a la playa, había subido la marea. Había subido la marea y encontré una paella. Y la encontré porque estaba la paellera agarrada, metida entre las piedras de Chipiona, de Faro. Y cuando entro en el restaurante me ve el cocinero con una paellera y adentro la 20 paelleras. ¡Asómate, mira dónde llega el agua! Llegaba el agua hasta el restaurante. Había subido la marea. Jesús, hay que hacerlo ahora con los 2 sacos de arroz. ¡Ay, llama para Sevilla! ¡Llama a Sevilla que traigo paella! Jesús, y yo con el bañador y con la paella. El cocinero. No vea, para Sevilla. Y al último, que cuando ya salió la bien de regla, estamos llorando los dos. Me cobró el tío la paella. a meter en la paellera. Me mandó por la noche, había bajado el agua y por la mañana había subido. Cualquiera estaba donde la paellera, ¿sabes? A lo mejor está en el barco ese del petróleo.
En el Prestige.